Daewon stood in the center of the scanning chamber and tried not to think about dying. The room was enormous, bigger than any cathedral he had seen on Earth. The walls glowed with a soft blue light that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. All around him, crystalline structures grew from the floor and ceiling, meeting in the middle to form organic-looking pillars. They hummed with energy he could feel in his teeth. 3 aliens sat on floating platforms in front of him. They called themselves the Readers. Their bodies were tall and thin, with skin that looked like polished stone. Where their eyes should have been, there were only smooth surfaces that reflected everything. They wore robes that seemed to be made of living fabric, constantly shifting colors from purple to deep red. Daewon was 42 years old and had been a soldier before becoming a diplomat. He had seen combat during the First Contact War, when humanity first met the collective. He had watched friends die. He had lost his wife and daughter when their colony was destroyed. After that, something inside him had closed off like a door slamming shut. The military doctors said he compartmentalized his trauma. His therapist said he built walls. Daewon just called it survival. Now Earth had sent him here to the Nexus Station as a representative. The war had ended 5 years ago with an uneasy peace. The collective controlled most of the galaxy. They were made up of dozens of species who all shared one thing. They could read minds. Not all minds, and not perfectly, but enough to know what others were thinking and feeling. They built their entire civilization on this mental connection. Humans were different. Human minds were closed, private, isolated. The collective found this disturbing. They said it was like trying to talk to ghosts, so they required all new species joining the galactic community to undergo a consciousness scan, to prove they were real, thinking beings, to prove they had souls. The middle reader raised one long hand. Its voice filled the chamber, not through sound, but directly in Daewon's mind. The sensation was like cold water being poured into his skull. "We begin," it said. The pressure started immediately. Daewon felt something pushing against his thoughts, trying to slide inside his mind like fingers prying open a locked box. It wasn't painful exactly, but it was wrong. Invasive. He wanted to run, to fight, to do anything except stand there and let these creatures dig through his memories. But he was a diplomat now. He had a job to do. Earth needed the collective's technology, their trade routes, their protection. So Daewon stood still and let them try. The pressure increased. He felt the readers moving through his surface thoughts, touching his recent memories. They saw him arriving at the station. They saw his briefing with the Earth delegation. They saw his morning routine, his coffee, his reports. Shallow things, surface things, then they went deeper. Daewon felt them reaching for the places where he kept his pain locked away, the memories of his family, the sounds of the attack, the smell of burning metal and burning flesh, the silence that came after. That door inside him, the one he had slammed shut 5 years ago, rattled under their touch. But it stayed closed. The readers pushed harder. Daewon could feel their confusion growing. In his mind, their voices overlapped like static on a radio. Where is the core? There is nothing here. The consciousness signature is incomplete. The pressure became crushing. It felt like being underwater, sinking deeper and deeper with no air in his lungs. Daewon's knees buckled. Sweat ran down his face. His vision blurred. The readers were tearing through his mind now, desperate to find something they expected to be there. But all they found were walls, compartments, empty rooms where emotions should have been, the places where Daewon had buried everything that hurt too much to feel. Finally, the pressure stopped. Daewon collapsed to his knees, gasping. His hands shook. His heart hammered in his chest. He looked up at the 3 readers and saw something he had never seen in any alien before. Fear. The middle reader stood from its platform. When it spoke, its mental voice trembled. "This is impossible. We have scanned thousands of species across the galaxy. Every conscious mind has a core, a center where the self resides. But you have nothing. You are hollow, empty. There is no real consciousness inside you. You are like a shell pretending to be alive." The words hit Daewon harder than any physical blow. Hollow, empty, not real. Part of him wanted to agree. Part of him had felt hollow since the day he lost everything. But another part of him, the soldier part, the part that had survived when others died, got angry. Daewon stood up slowly. His legs still shook, but he forced himself to stand straight. He looked directly at the readers and spoke out loud, his voice steady. If I'm hollow, if I'm empty, if I'm not real, then why are you afraid? The silence that followed was absolute. The three readers stared at him with their eyeless faces. The crystals in the room stopped humming. Even the pulsing light in the walls seemed to pause. The middle reader spoke again, and this time its voice was cold. You will wait here. The council must decide what to do about your species. If all humans are like you, if you are all hollow things walking around pretending to be alive, then you are a threat to the natural order of consciousness itself. Guards appeared at the chamber doors. They were tall, armored creatures with weapons that hummed with the same energy as the crystals. They surrounded Daewon but did not touch him. They seemed reluctant to get too close. As they led him away, Daewon caught his reflection in one of the crystalline pillars. He looked tired, older than his years, but his eyes were clear and focused. He had asked the right question. If he was really nothing, really empty, really just a hollow shell, the readers would not have been afraid. But they were afraid. He had seen it, felt it in their voices, and that fear told him something important. Whatever was inside him, whatever they could not see or read or understand, it was powerful enough to terrify beings who thought they knew everything about consciousness. They locked him in a detention cell deep inside the station. The walls were smooth and white, without windows or decorations. A single bed, a small bathroom, nothing else. Daewon sat on the bed and activated his communication device. He needed to contact Earth. He needed to warn them. The signal went through after several tries. Ambassador Yejin's face appeared on the small screen. She was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She looked worried. Captain Daewon, what happened? We heard the scan went wrong. It's worse than wrong, Daewon said. They think we're not real. They think humans don't have true consciousness. And they're scared of us because of it. Yejin's face went pale. What are they going to do? They're calling an emergency council session. Yejin, you need to get me out of here. And you need to warn Earth. If the collective decides humanity is a threat. He didn't need to finish the sentence. They both knew what the collective did to threats. They had seen it during the First Contact War. Yejin nodded slowly. I'll invoke the due process protocols. It's an old collective law. They have to give you 48 hours before they can take action. That should buy us time. Time for what? Time to figure out if being hollow is really a weakness or if it's the only thing that's going to save us all. The transmission ended. Daewon sat alone in his white cell and thought about that door inside his mind. The one that had stayed closed even when the most powerful telepaths in the galaxy tried to force it open. Maybe being hollow wasn't the same as being empty. Maybe the space inside him, the silence where his pain lived, was actually a kind of armor. And maybe the collective was right to be afraid. Dr. Hayren stared at the brain scans on her screen and felt something she rarely felt. Excitement. The underground research facility in Antarctica was cold and sterile, but right now she barely noticed. She had been studying consciousness for 15 years, and these scans showed something incredible. She was 38 years old, thin, and always tired from working too much. Her colleagues said she was difficult to work with. She knew they were right. Social interactions exhausted her. Small talk felt like torture. But give her a problem to solve, a puzzle to work through, and she could focus for days without stopping. The emergency call from Captain Daewon had come 3 hours ago. Now the entire military council was gathered in the briefing room, waiting for her to explain why humans were being called hollow, why the collective thought they weren't real, why they might all die because of it. Hayren walked into the briefing room with her tablet clutched against her chest. 20 people sat around a long table, military officers in uniform, government officials in suits, scientists in lab coats. All of them looked at her with worried faces. She hated being the center of attention, but this was too important to let her anxiety win. Commander Jae-hyun sat at the head of the table. He was 51 years old with gray hair cut military short. His face looked like it had been carved from stone. He gestured for Hayren to begin. She connected her tablet to the main display. Brain scans filled the wall-sized screen. These are scans of human brains compared to the brains of telepathic species, she said. Her voice was quiet but steady. The collective species all have similar neural structures. Their thoughts flow freely between different parts of the brain. Everything is connected, open, accessible. When they read each other's minds, they're literally seeing this flow of electrical and chemical signals. She switched to a different image. Human brains are different. We evolved with something called compartmentalization. Our brains create barriers between different types of memories and emotions. We separate our conscious thoughts from our unconscious ones. We hide painful memories away. We build mental walls, a general spoke up. So we're fragmented, broken? No, Hayrin said firmly. We're protected. These walls, these empty spaces, they're not defects. They're survival mechanisms. When telepaths try to read us, they hit these barriers and find nothing. To them, it looks like we don't have a core consciousness. But we do. It's just hidden behind walls they can't break through. Commander Jae-hyun leaned forward. Can we use this? Turn it into an advantage? Hayrin felt her heart race. This was what she had been hoping someone would ask. Yes, I think we can. The collective coordinates everything through telepathy. Their fleets move together because the pilots share thoughts. Their strategies work because everyone knows the plan instantly. But if we put humans near them, humans with strong mental barriers, we create interference. Static. Noise they can't filter out. You're talking about using our people as jamming signals, Jae-hyun said. It wasn't a question. I'm talking about using our strongest minds, people with trauma, with PTSD, with anxiety disorders, with autism, with anything that creates strong mental compartmentalization. These people aren't broken. They're naturally resistant to telepathic intrusion. They're weapons we didn't know we had. The room fell silent. People looked at each other uncomfortably. Finally, someone spoke. You want to recruit people based on their psychological damage? That's insane, Hayrin met their eyes. The collective wants to exterminate us because we're different. Because we're hollow. I'm saying we take that hollowness and make it our greatest strength. We find the people who are most hollow, and we turn them into our first line of defense. Jae-hyun stood up. I like it. Call it Project Hollow. Dr. Hayrin, you'll lead the research team. Start recruiting immediately. I want pilots, soldiers, engineers, anyone who fits your criteria. We have 48 hours before the collective makes their decision. We need to be ready. The meeting ended. People filed out, talking in low voices. Hayrin stayed behind, staring at the brain scans on the screen. She thought about all the times people had told her she was different, that she didn't fit in, that something was wrong with her. Maybe nothing was wrong. Maybe she was exactly what humanity needed. 2 days later, Lieutenant Tae-young walked into Hayrin's lab. He was 29 years old, with sharp features and eyes that never quite focused on anything. He was a pilot, one of the best humanity had. He was also barely holding himself together. They said you wanted to see me, he said. His voice was flat, emotionless. Hayrin nodded. I reviewed your file. You have excellent combat scores, but you also have severe PTSD from the First Contact War. You see a therapist twice a week. You take medication to sleep. Tae-young's jaw tightened. If you're here to tell me I'm unfit for duty, save your breath. I've heard it before. I'm not here to disqualify you, Hayrin said. I'm here to recruit you. Your PTSD creates mental chaos, intrusive thoughts, flashbacks, hypervigilance. To a telepath, that chaos is like trying to read a book during an earthquake. You're naturally resistant to mental intrusion. I want you for a special unit, Tae-young stared at her. You're serious. You want me because I'm damaged. I want you because you survived, Hayrin corrected, and because what you carry inside makes you dangerous to telepaths. Will you join us? He thought about it for a long moment. Then he nodded. If my broken brain can help win a war, then yes, I'm in. They recruited 15 more people that day. Engineer Mi-sun, who was 45 and so quiet she seemed to disappear in crowds. Her dissociative tendencies made her nearly invisible to telepathic detection. A mathematician with severe OCD whose rigid thought patterns created unbreakable mental loops. A former soldier with schizophrenia whose multiple internal voices created static that confused mind readers. Each person brought their own kind of hollowness. Each one had been told they were broken in some way. Now they were being told they were weapons. While Project Hollow assembled on Earth, Ambassador Ye-jin worked frantically at the Nexus station. She had managed to delay Daewon's correction procedure by invoking old protocols. But the collective council was meeting and the decision was coming soon. She visited Daewon in his cell late one night. The guards let her through without question. They still seemed afraid to get too close to him. How are you holding up? She asked. Daewon sat on his bed looking tired but calm. I've been thinking about that scan. About what they found. Or didn't find. Earth is working on a response, Ye-jin said carefully. There might be a way to turn this situation around. I need to tell you something, Daewon said. Something I haven't told anyone. The scan didn't just fail to read me. For a moment at the very end, I felt like I was reading them. Like their fear opened a door and I could see inside their minds. Just for a second. But it was there. Yejin went very still. That shouldn't be possible. Humans aren't telepathic. Maybe we are, Daewon said quietly. Maybe our walls don't just keep thoughts out. Maybe they trap thoughts in. Maybe being hollow means we're like pressure vessels, building up something powerful that telepaths can't handle when it finally releases. Before Yejin could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. Red lights flashed. A voice echoed through the corridors in multiple languages. Emergency alert. Hostile action detected. All personnel to defensive positions. Yejin pulled out her communication device. Her face went pale as she read the message. The collective didn't wait for their own debate to finish, she said. They just launched an attack on Earth's outer colonies. They're not trying to integrate us anymore. They're trying to destroy us. Daewon stood up. His hands clenched into fists. We need to get out of here. We need to warn Earth. I know a way, Yejin said. But you have to trust me. And you have to understand that I've been preparing for this possibility for a long time. She pulled off her ambassador's badge and pressed a hidden button. Her eyes changed, becoming sharper, more focused. When she spoke again, her voice was different, harder. I'm not just an ambassador, Daewon. I've been an intelligence operative since before the First Contact War. And I've spent 5 years learning how the collective thinks. The fragmented way I compartmentalize my different roles, my different identities, it confuses telepaths. They think I have multiple personality disorder. But really, I'm just very good at being hollow. She smiled, and for the first time, Daewon saw the warrior hiding behind the diplomat's mask. Now let's get you out of here. Earth needs its hollow soldiers, and the war just started. The collective fleet moved through space like a school of fish. 500 ships acting as one mind. Their coordination was perfect because every pilot, every gunner, every commander was linked through telepathy. They could change formation in seconds. They could anticipate each other's movements. They never made mistakes until they encountered Tae-Young's squadron. Lieutenant Tae-Young sat in the cockpit of his fighter, hands steady on the controls, even though his heart was racing. Around him flew 11 other pilots. All of them were Project Hollow recruits. All of them carried trauma, disorders, or mental structures that made them resistant to telepathy. All of them had been told their entire lives that something was wrong with them. Now they were about to prove everyone wrong. Enemy fleet detected, the computer announced. Distance 50,000 kilometers in closing. Tae-Young opened the squadron channel. Remember your training. Don't think about formations or tactics. Let your minds wander. Let the chaos out. They can't coordinate if they can't filter through our noise. He closed his eyes for a moment and let himself remember the battle where his best friend died. The sound of the explosion, the feeling of helplessness, all the things his therapist had taught him to push away, he now pulled to the surface. The PTSD that had nearly destroyed his career became fuel. The collective ships came into visual range. They moved in perfect geometric patterns, each ship exactly where it needed to be. Beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Then Tae-Young's squadron entered their detection range. The effect was immediate. The perfect formation wavered. Ships drifted slightly out of position. The telepathic network that connected the collective pilots hit something it couldn't process. 12 human minds, each one a storm of uncontrolled thoughts and emotions. 12 blank spots in their mental radar. 12 sources of interference that scrambled their coordination. They're confused, one of Tae-Young's pilots said. I can see them hesitating. Hit them now, Tae-Young ordered. While they're trying to compensate, the squadron attacked. They didn't follow standard tactics. They couldn't because most of them had disorders that made following orders difficult anyway. Engineer Mi-sun, flying a support craft, darted through the enemy formation in seemingly random patterns that made no tactical sense. The collective ships couldn't predict her movements because she wasn't thinking about tactics at all. She was thinking about the engine specifications of her craft, counting prime numbers, anything to keep her mind occupied with something other than the battle. It worked. The collective fleet broke formation trying to track her, and when they broke formation, they lost their telepathic advantage. The Battle of Titan lasted 6 hours. By the end, the collective fleet had retreated. Not because they lost more ships, but because they couldn't function near the hollow humans. Their pilots reported crippling headaches. Their telepaths said it was like trying to think through static. Some of them claimed they could feel the human minds touching theirs, cold and invasive, even though humans weren't supposed to be telepathic at all. News of the victory spread quickly through human space, but Tae-young didn't feel victorious. He sat in the debriefing room, hands shaking from adrenaline and exhaustion, and listened to Dr. Hayron explain what had happened. "The collective relies on mental clarity and connection," she said. "You disrupted that. Your psychological profiles make you unpredictable, and unpredictability is poison to a hive mind. But there's something else. Some of you reported feeling the collective ships before you saw them. Is that true?" Several pilots nodded. Tae-young was one of them. "I thought it was just combat instinct," he said, "but it felt different. Like I could sense where they were going to be before they moved." Hayron looked excited and frightened at the same time. "I think proximity to telepaths is changing you. All of you. The walls in your minds aren't just keeping thoughts out anymore. They're learning to bounce thoughts back. You're becoming mirrors, and that's terrifying the collective even more than your unpredictability." Back on Earth, Commander Jae-hyun studied the battle reports with satisfaction. Project Hollow was working. But they needed more. They needed to take the fight to the collective, not just defend human space. He called a strategy meeting with his top officers. The collective controls their entire military through telepathic command networks. If we can insert hollow operatives into key locations, we can disrupt those networks, make them blind, make them vulnerable. "You're talking about infiltration," one general said. "But how do we infiltrate a society of mind readers?" "By being exactly what we are," Jae-hyun replied. "Hollow. They can't read us, which means they can't detect us. Engineer Mi-sun has been working on stealth technology that exploits this. Ships and equipment designed to be piloted by hollow minds. Technology that's invisible to telepathic detection because it's operated by people who are invisible to telepathic detection." Mi-sun entered the room carrying a small device. She was as quiet and unassuming as ever. Most people barely noticed when she entered a room. That quality made her perfect for her job. "This is a neural damper," she said in her soft voice. "It amplifies the natural interference that hollow minds create. One person wearing this can disrupt telepathic communication for everyone within 100 meters. I've also designed ships with hulls that reflect telepathic scans the same way our minds do. The collective won't just fail to see us coming. They won't even know we're there." "How soon can you have a fleet ready?" Jae-hyun asked. 2 weeks. Maybe less if we skip some safety tests." "Skip them," Jae-hyun said. "We don't have time for safe. We need effective." Meanwhile, Daewon and Ambassador Ye-jin had escaped the Nexus station and were making their way back to Earth through a series of stolen ships and false identities. Ye-jin's ability to fragment her personality made her almost impossible to track. To telepathic sensors, she looked like 3 different people depending on which aspect of her personality was dominant at any given moment. They stopped at a neutral trading station to refuel. While Ye-jin handled the logistics, Daewon sat in the ship and tried to understand what was happening to him. Ever since the scan at the Nexus, he had felt different, more aware. Like a door in his mind had been forced open and now wouldn't quite close again. He could feel the station around him. Not physically, but mentally. He could sense the thousands of minds on board, most of them alien, most of them telepathic to some degree. They felt like static on a radio, always present at the edge of his awareness. But some minds felt different, clearer. He realized he could almost tell what species they were just by how their thoughts felt. Ye-jin returned with supplies and found him staring at nothing. "Are you all right?" she asked. "I can feel them," Daewon said quietly. "All the telepaths on this station. I can feel their minds like heat from a fire." "Is this normal?" Ye-jin sat down across from him. Her expression was serious. "It's happening to all the hollow operatives. Exposure to telepathy is changing us. We're adapting. Our minds are learning to do what telepathic minds do, but in our own way. Behind our walls, in our private spaces, something new is growing. The collective tried to read me and failed," Daewon said. "But in failing, they taught me how to read them." "Is that what you're saying?" "I'm saying that being hollow doesn't mean being powerless. It means being undefined, potential energy waiting to become kinetic. The collective fears us because they can't understand us. But maybe we're starting to understand them." They left the station and continued toward Earth. Behind them, collective intelligence agents tried to track their escape and failed. The 2 hollow humans left no mental trace, no telepathic signature. To a society that relied on reading minds, Daewon and Yejin were ghosts. 3 days later, Daewon stood on Earth's surface for the first time in 6 months. The Antarctic base where Project Hollow had started was now a massive military complex. Hundreds of recruits trained every day, learning to weaponize their psychological differences. Commander Jae-hyun greeted him personally. "Welcome home, Captain. Earth needs you now more than ever. We're planning something big, something that will change this war completely." "What kind of plan?" Daewon asked. Jae-hyun smiled. It was not a kind smile. "We're going to do to them what they tried to do to you. We're going to scan their minds, but unlike their gentle telepathic probes, we're going to hit them with everything hollow humans have. All our trauma, all our chaos, all our private darkness. We're going to show them what it feels like when hollow things fight back." Daewon looked out at the training grounds, at all the people who had been called broken and damaged their entire lives. Now they were soldiers. Now they were weapons. Now they were the only thing standing between humanity and extinction. He thought about the fear in the readers' voices when they called him hollow. He thought about the question he had asked them, and he realized the answer. They were afraid because emptiness can be filled with anything, and what humanity was filling their hollowness with was the will to survive, no matter the cost. Dr. Hayrin stood in front of a room full of scientists and military leaders. On the screen behind her was something that should have been impossible. Mathematical proof that consciousness required privacy. "I call it the paradox doctrine," she said. Her voice was steady despite her exhaustion. She had not slept in 3 days. "The collective believes that true consciousness requires connection, that minds must be open to each other to be real. But my research proves the opposite. True consciousness requires the ability to be unknown." She changed the slide to show neural scans of collective species compared to humans. When every thought is shared, every mind becomes predictable. The collective telepaths can anticipate each other perfectly because there are no secrets, no hidden motivations, no private desires. They've achieved perfect unity by sacrificing true individuality. "But humans," she continued, "we keep secrets even from ourselves. We hide our pain, our fears, our dreams. This makes us unpredictable. And unpredictability is the foundation of free will. You cannot make a truly free choice if everyone around you knows what you're going to choose before you choose it." Commander Jae-hyun leaned forward. "You're saying the collective isn't really conscious at all." "I'm saying they're conscious in a different way," Hayrin replied. "But their consciousness is limited by their own transparency. They can't surprise themselves. They can't change in unexpected ways. They're stuck in patterns they can't break, because breaking patterns requires private thought, hidden planning, secret rebellion. All things that telepathy makes impossible." "How does this help us win?" another general asked. Hayrin smiled. It was not a happy smile. "Because now we know their weakness. The collective has spent millennia building a society where everyone knows what everyone else is thinking. They've forgotten how to deal with deception, with hidden intentions, with secrets. We're going to use that against them. Operation Void starts tomorrow." Operation Void was simple in concept and terrifying in execution. Hollow operatives would infiltrate collective territory. They wouldn't sabotage equipment or steal information. They would simply exist, live normal lives, take normal jobs, be present in collective society as blank spots in the telepathic network. 50 operatives volunteered. Tae-young was one of them. So was Mi-sun. They trained for 2 weeks on collective customs and languages. Then they boarded Mi-sun's stealth ships and disappeared into enemy space. Mi-sun took a job as a maintenance worker on a collective industrial station. Nobody noticed her. She had always been good at not being noticed. She did her work, kept to herself, and created a sphere of telepathic silence wherever she went. Other workers started avoiding her section of the station without knowing why. They felt uncomfortable, near her, like something was wrong, but they couldn't explain what. Tae-young posed as a cargo pilot, moving goods between collective worlds. His presence on ships disrupted the telepathic coordination of the crews. Small errors started happening. Cargo got misplaced. Schedules got confused. Nothing major, but enough to create friction in a society that relied on perfect mental coordination. Across collective space, 50 hollow humans created 50 gaps in the telepathic network. The collective started calling them void walkers, mind ghosts, hollow demons. Fear spread. If telepaths couldn't detect these humans, what else might be, hiding in the spaces between thoughts? Meanwhile, Ambassador Yejin had managed something even more dangerous. She had infiltrated the Sovereign Mind Council itself. Her fragmented personality made her impossible to read clearly. To the collective telepaths, she appeared as multiple people occupying one body. They found this disturbing but fascinating. Some of them wanted to study her. Others wanted to help her integrate her fractured psyche. None of them suspected she was a spy. She attended council meetings, sitting quietly in the observer section, while the most powerful telepaths in the galaxy debated humanity's fate. And as she sat there, fragments of her personality listening to different conversations simultaneously, she discovered something shocking. The Sovereign Mind Council was not as unified as it appeared. Individual members had doubts, fears, private opinions they tried to hide even from each other. The telepathic network that bound them together was starting to crack under the pressure of the human problem. Some council members secretly believed humans should be left alone. Others wanted genocide. A few were questioning whether the collective's way of life was as superior as they had always believed. Yejin reported this back to Earth through encrypted channels. The collective was already fracturing from within. They just needed the right push. That push came from Daewon. He had been training with Dr. Rin, learning to control the strange, new abilities that exposure to telepaths had awakened in him. He couldn't read minds the way collective species could, but he could reflect thoughts back at telepaths, amplify their own doubts and fears, turn their telepathy against them. "You're like a mirror," Rin explained. "When telepaths try to read you, they see themselves. Their own thoughts bounced back, distorted and amplified. It drives them mad because they can't tell which thoughts are theirs and which are reflections." "Can I control it?" Daewon asked. "That's what we're going to find out." They tested his abilities on volunteer collective telepaths, refugees who had fled to human space-seeking asylum. The results were dramatic. When Daewon focused on a telepath, they experienced intense confusion and anxiety. Their own thoughts became unclear. Some of them reported feeling like they were losing their minds. "This is cruel," one of the test subjects said afterward, "like being alone inside my own head for the first time in my life. Terrifying." Daewon felt guilty, but he also felt necessary. The collective had tried to exterminate humanity. This was survival. Commander Jae-hyun called him to a private meeting. "The Sovereign Mind itself has demanded you be captured and delivered to them. They want to scan you again properly this time. They think if they can understand you, they can develop a defense against all hollow humans." "So we send me," Daewon said. "It wasn't a question. We send you," Jae-hyun confirmed. "But not to be scanned, to do the scanning. You're going to touch the Sovereign Mind directly and show it what hollow really means." The plan was insane. Daewon would surrender himself to the collective. They would bring him before the Sovereign Mind, the collective consciousness formed by the 10 most powerful telepaths in the galaxy. And when they tried to scan him, he would reverse the process. He would force them to experience what he experienced: isolation, privacy, the hollow spaces where individuality lived. "This could kill you," Rin warned. "Your mind against the combined power of 10 master telepaths. The psychic feedback alone might destroy your consciousness." "I know," Daewon said. "But if it works, if I can make them understand what they've been missing their entire existence, maybe they'll stop trying to destroy us for being different." He surrendered at a neutral station. Collective security forces took him into custody immediately. They handled him like he was radioactive, afraid to get too close. They transported him to the collective capital world in a ship with minimal crew, all wearing telepathic dampeners to protect themselves from his hollow presence. The Sovereign Mind waited for him in a chamber even larger than the one where the readers had first scanned him. 10 beings sat in a circle, their minds merged into one consciousness. When they spoke, reality itself seemed to vibrate with the power of their unified voice. "You are the hollow one. You are the void that walks. You are the thing that should not be. We will understand you. We will solve you. And then we will eliminate your entire species so that the natural order of consciousness can be restored." Daewon stood in the center of their circle and felt their power wash over him like a wave. 10 minds working as one, pushing against his barriers, trying to force their way into his hollow spaces. He did not resist. Instead, he opened himself. He let them in. But opening a hollow space is not like opening a door. It's like opening a pit. The sovereign mind poured into Day One's consciousness, expecting to find nothing, expecting to finally prove that humans were empty shells. Instead, they found infinity. They found all the things Day One had locked away. His grief, his trauma, his love for his lost family, his fear, his anger, his dreams, his regrets. But more than that, they found possibility. They found the space where choices lived before they were made. They found the silence where new thoughts were born. They found the privacy where the self could change and grow without outside influence. The sovereign mind, which had existed as one unified consciousness for thousands of years, suddenly experienced what it was like to be alone, to have thoughts that no one else could hear, to make decisions without consensus, to be individual. It was the most terrifying thing they had ever experienced. And in their terror, they broke. The unified consciousness that had ruled the collective for millennia shattered into 10 separate minds. 10 individuals who suddenly remembered what it was like to be alone inside their own heads. They screamed, not in pain but in shock and horror and wonder. Across the galaxy, every collective ship, every telepathic network, every shared consciousness felt the rupture. The sovereign mind had fallen, and in its fall, it had learned what humanity had known all along. Being hollow was not a weakness, it was freedom. The galaxy was breaking, not physically but mentally. Across hundreds of worlds, billions of beings who had lived their entire lives connected to telepathic networks suddenly found themselves alone inside their own heads. Some adapted quickly. Others went mad. Many simply sat in silence trying to understand what privacy felt like. On Meridian Prime, the collective capital, chaos reigned. The government had collapsed when the sovereign mind shattered. Ships drifted in orbit with no one coordinating their movements. Public services stopped working. The entire infrastructure of a galactic civilization had been built on telepathic connection, and now that connection was gone. Day One woke up in a medical facility 3 days after the breaking. His head felt like it had been split open and put back together wrong. Dr. Hayron sat beside his bed, looking exhausted but relieved. "You almost died," she said quietly. "The psychic feedback when the sovereign mind broke nearly destroyed your consciousness. We weren't sure you would wake up." Day One tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Everything hurt. "What happened?" "After I opened myself to them." "You showed them what being hollow really means," Hayron said. "And it was too much for them." The sovereign mind fractured into 10 separate individuals. That fracture cascaded through every telepathic network in the collective. Billions of beings experienced individuality for the first time in their species' history. It's been 3 days and they're still trying to figure out how to function as individuals instead of as a hive mind. Are they dying? Some are. Those who can't adapt to privacy. But most are learning. It's painful for them being alone in their thoughts. But they're surviving. You didn't destroy them, Day One. You freed them. Whether they wanted to be freed or not. The words sat heavy in the room. Day One had not meant to break an entire civilization. He had just wanted to survive, to protect humanity. But the consequences of his actions had spread far beyond anything he had imagined. "What do we do now?" he asked. "Now we help them," Hayron said. "Because if we don't, they'll die. Or worse, they'll blame us for destroying their way of life and come after us again, this time with nothing to lose." Ambassador Ye Jin had taken charge of the humanitarian effort. She worked with former collective leaders who were struggling to understand how to govern without telepathic consensus. She taught them about voting, about debate, about the messy reality of individual opinions and disagreements. "You're going to argue now," she explained to a room full of confused aliens. "You're going to disagree with each other. You're going to have private thoughts and secret plans and personal ambitions. This is normal. This is what individuality means. It's horrible," one of them said. "I can't hear my colleagues' thoughts anymore. How am I supposed to know if they're telling the truth? How can we trust each other?" Yejin smiled sadly. "Welcome to the human experience. We never really know what others are thinking. We have to take risks. We have to have faith. It's terrifying and beautiful at the same time. Lieutenant Tae-young found himself in an unexpected role. Former collective soldiers, confused and traumatized by their sudden individuality, needed someone who understood what it was like to have a broken mind. Tae-young, who had spent years fighting his PTSD, became their teacher. "The silence in your head is not an enemy," he told a group of ex-collective Marines. "It's a space where you can heal, where you can grow. I know it feels empty right now. I know it hurts. But that emptiness is freedom. You get to choose what fills it." One of them, a tall being with gray skin and too many eyes, spoke hesitantly. "I used to know exactly who I was. I was part of the network, part of something bigger. Now I'm just me, and I don't know who that is." "Then you get to find out," Tae-young said. "That's the gift of being hollow. You're not defined by what others think of you. You define yourself." Engineer Mi-sun worked on a different problem. The collective's technology had been designed for telepathic operation. Ships, factories, communication networks, everything required mental connection to function. She led teams of engineers, both human and alien, in retrofitting the technology for individual use. It was exhausting work, but Mi-sun found something unexpected in the process. Former collective engineers who now experienced individuality started having new ideas, creative solutions that would never have occurred to a hive mind. Innovation required privacy, it turned out. New thoughts needed space to grow before being shared. "We're building something better," one of her alien colleagues said one day. The old technology was efficient but stagnant. Now, with individual minds working together instead of merged together, we're actually improving things, making discoveries we never could have made before. Mi-sun smiled. For someone who had always felt invisible, she was now at the center of rebuilding a civilization, and she was good at it. But not everyone was happy with the changes. A faction of former collective members believed that humans had corrupted their perfect society. They called themselves the Pure Mind Movement. They wanted to restore the telepathic networks, to return to the old ways, to eliminate the humans who had brought this curse of individuality upon them. Commander Jae-hyun tracked their activities with growing concern. The Pure Mind had stolen ships and weapons. They were gathering forces. They were planning something. The attack came without warning. 36 ships appeared in Earth's orbit and began firing on population centers. They didn't try to negotiate. They didn't make demands. They just attacked, determined to destroy the source of what they saw as galactic corruption. Earth's defenses responded immediately, but the Pure Mind forces fought with the desperation of people who had lost everything and had nothing left to lose. The battle was brutal. Commander Jae-hyun led the defense from the command center. He coordinated ships, directed fire, managed resources. But the Pure Mind had one advantage. They had found a way to reconnect temporarily, to share thoughts and coordinate perfectly for short periods. It was killing them, burning out their newly individual minds, but it made them deadly. "They're going to break through the orbital defense line," his second-in-command reported. "We need reinforcements." "There are no reinforcements," Jae-hyun said quietly. "Everything we have is already here." He made a decision then, the kind of decision that only an individual mind could make, a sacrifice that a hive mind would never allow because it valued the collective over any single member. Jae-hyun took control of a fighter personally and flew directly toward the largest Pure Mind ship. His crew tried to stop him, tried to talk him out of it, but he had made his choice privately, in the hollow space inside his own mind where no one else could reach. He crashed his fighter into the Pure Mind flagship's reactor. The explosion destroyed both ships and created enough chaos in the enemy formation that Earth's defenses could rally. The battle turned. Within an hour, the Pure Mind forces were defeated, but Commander Jae-hyun was gone. Daewon stood at Jae-hyun's memorial service and felt something crack inside him. Another person lost. Another sacrifice made. He thought about his wife and daughter, about all the people who had died in this conflict, about the price of survival. Was it worth it? He asked Dr. Hayren afterward. All this death, all this destruction, just to prove we have the right to be different? Hayren looked at him with tired eyes. I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. We did what we had to do to survive. But survival always has a cost. The question is whether we learn from that cost or let it break us. That night, Daewon stood on the roof of the military complex and looked at the stars. Somewhere up there, billions of beings were learning what it meant to be individuals. Some would thrive. Some would suffer. All of them would have to make their own choices now, for better or worse. He thought about the door inside his mind, the one that had stayed closed during that first scan. It was still there, but it felt different now. Not locked shut, but simply closed. A boundary he could control. Inside that space, he kept his memories of his family, his grief, his love. Private things, sacred things. Being hollow didn't mean being empty. It meant having space to carry what mattered. It meant having room to grow, to change, to become something new. The sovereign mind had been terrified of that space because they had forgotten what it was like to have anything private, anything truly their own. Hyren found him there an hour later. She stood beside him in comfortable silence. Finally, she spoke. Ambassador Yejin sent a message. The former collective worlds want to establish formal relations with Earth. They want to learn from us. How to build societies of individuals. How to make democracy work. How to live with privacy. Are we qualified to teach that? Daewon asked. We barely understand it ourselves. Maybe that's exactly why we're qualified, Hyren said. We know how hard it is. We know the cost. We know that being hollow, being private, being individual, it's not always comfortable or easy, but it's worth it. Because the alternative is losing yourself completely. Daewon nodded slowly. The war was over, but the work was just beginning. Humanity had survived by embracing their hollowness, by weaponizing their privacy, by proving that being different wasn't a defect. Now they had to help others understand that same truth. That consciousness came in many forms. That connection and isolation were both valid ways to exist.